"You've done enough, Mom. It's time you left." You never expect your child, the one you bathed, fed, sacrificed sleep for, and silently cheered through life, to look you in the eye and say, "You don't belong here anymore." But that's exactly what my daughter Melissa told me 3 weeks after I paid off the remaining $167,000 on her mortgage. I'm 68 years old, widowed at 54, retired at 62 after 39 grueling years as a nurse. And for all those years, I'd been setting money aside like clockwork, not for vacations or luxury, but to ensure my daughter had a better life than I did. Melissa was my only child. Her father passed away far too soon, and I made it my life's purpose to make sure she had everything. I didn't remarry. I didn't even date. I was too busy working doubles, saving money, and making sure Melissa never went without. When she and her husband bought that modest 4-bedroom in a quiet Connecticut suburb, I offered to help with the down payment. She hesitated, but I insisted. "Just consider it an early inheritance," I told her. They moved in, started their family, and by 2022 had 2 young boys, my precious grandsons, Ethan and Caleb. After a fall that fractured my hip and months of painful rehab, Melissa suggested I come live with them. "It'll be easier for everyone, and the boys would love it," she said. I was hesitant, but I agreed. At the time, it felt like the right thing. Family under one roof. They cleared out the guest room for me. I helped around the house as much as I could. Laundry, groceries, school pickups, reading bedtime stories. I didn't want to be a burden. I'd never been one. I gave them space, paid for most of the utilities, and even helped with grocery bills. Quietly. But then came the conversation that changed everything. It was around Christmas, 2023. Melissa and her husband Greg had been stressed. Mortgage payments were getting tough. Greg's business was slow. Melissa's hours at the law firm had been cut back. I could see the cracks forming. The tension was thick in the air, and the joy of family dinners had been replaced with silence, forced smiles, and whispered arguments. So I did what mothers do. I stepped in. Quietly, without their knowledge, I contacted the bank and requested a full mortgage payoff letter. I still had the bulk of my retirement money untouched. I asked the bank to make the house legally mine once the debt was cleared, at least temporarily, because I knew the situation was volatile. I wasn't trying to take anything away. I just wanted to secure the house, ensure they wouldn't lose it if things spiraled. The payment cleared 2 weeks later. I didn't say a word. I figured I'd tell Melissa once things calmed down. Once Christmas passed, I wanted it to be a fresh start for them. A gift, really. But that was my mistake. I waited too long. 3 weeks later, I walked in from the grocery store and overheard Melissa talking to Greg in the kitchen. Her voice was low, but I caught it. "She's too involved. She's always here. I feel like I can't breathe." My heart dropped. Greg's reply was even worse. "You're her only child. She's clinging. But this isn't her house. She doesn't get a say." It wasn't the words alone. It was the way they said it. Cold, decisive, final. Like I was a piece of furniture no longer needed, something they couldn't wait to get rid of. That night at dinner, the air was tight. Caleb was picking at his peas, Ethan was on his tablet, and Melissa kept glancing at me like she had something to say. Eventually, she did. "Mom," she began, clearing her throat, "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time you got your own place. You've done so much for us. Too much even. But you deserve space. Freedom." I stared at her. I couldn't speak. Greg kept eating like this wasn't the end of a chapter, like I wasn't about to lose the only home I'd felt safe in since my husband died. I tried to respond calmly. "Melissa, I paid off this house." She cut me off. "That's not the point. This was always going to be our house. You said it was a gift, and now we need space." A gift. That word burned. I had given everything to her. My youth, my money, my dreams, and now my home. They gave me 2 weeks to find somewhere comfortable. I packed my things quietly. I couldn't afford a new house. My retirement funds were low now, thanks to the mortgage payoff. I ended up renting a tiny senior apartment complex on the outskirts of town. It was clean and quiet, but it wasn't home. It never would be. Melissa didn't visit. Greg sent me a text once thanking me for understanding. 2 months passed. Then, out of nowhere, Melissa called. "Mom," she said, voice trembling, "I just got a letter from the bank. It says the house title, it's in your name. You own the house, not us." I didn't say anything at first. She paused. Did you do something?" I answered calmly, "Yes, I paid it off. In my name." Silence. Then I said, "I didn't mean to take anything away, but I needed to protect what I sacrificed everything for." Another silence. Then, click. She hung up, and just like that, everything shifted. 3 days after that phone call, Melissa showed up at my senior apartment, unannounced. I wasn't ready to see her. I wasn't ready to look into the eyes of someone I once carried through fevers and heartbreaks, only to be tossed aside like yesterday's newspaper, the minute I became inconvenient. She looked different, less confident, more uncertain. Her hair was in a messy bun, and she had that same look she wore as a teenager whenever she got caught sneaking in late. But there was no apology in her voice, only accusation. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside without waiting for me to invite her. I sat down slowly in the armchair, my hip still giving me trouble. She stayed standing, arms crossed, defensive. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't here to ask why, just to demand how. "We got a letter from the bank. It says the house deed is in your name. It says you own it outright. Greg and I are confused. I thought you paid it off as a gift, Mom." Her voice had the same sharp edge it carried the night she asked me to move out. I kept my own voice calm, steady. "I did pay it off, but I never said it was a gift. I just didn't tell you how I did it." She blinked. "You changed the deed behind our backs. I protected the investment I made. If you had lost the house, everything I worked for would have vanished. I had the mortgage transferred to my name before I paid it off. The paperwork was all legal." "That's not fair," she snapped. "We live there. You can't just take it back." I looked at her for a long moment, then finally asked the question that had been echoing in my mind since the day I packed my boxes. "Why did you want me out?" Her mouth opened and closed like she wasn't expecting it. "It wasn't personal," she said weakly. It got to be too much. Greg said it felt like we didn't have our own space. You were always here, always involved." "I was involved," I said, "because I cared, because you asked me to move in after my fall, because I was helping with your kids and your bills." Melissa looked away, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of shame cross her face. Then her tone shifted, softer now. "We just wanted our home to feel like ours again." I nodded slowly. "I understand that. But the truth is, Melissa, you didn't want me there. But you still wanted my support. You were fine with my money, my help, my sacrifices, until I became inconvenient. And now that the house is in my name, you're suddenly interested again." She looked stunned, like no one had ever called her out like that before. Then came the inevitable pivot, the attempt to flip the script. "So what now?" she asked. "You want us to move out? You want to evict your own daughter and grandkids?" I let out a breath. She was playing the guilt card, a card I had written the deck for. "I'm not doing anything, for now," I said, "but I needed you to understand that I'm not disposable. So I don't owe you anything. Not anymore." She was quiet for a long time. Then she muttered, "Greg's going to be furious." That told me everything I needed to know. Even now, she wasn't worried about me. She was worried about how her husband would take it, how this would affect them. Not once did she ask if I was okay, if I had food, if I was lonely. She left not long after, promising to talk to Greg and sort this out. I knew what that meant. They'd scramble to find a loophole, maybe call a lawyer, try to undo what I had legally done. But it was too late. I wasn't trying to be vindictive. I was trying to make a point. I had no intention of kicking them out, but I needed to send a message. That love doesn't come with entitlement. That help doesn't come without appreciation. 3 days later, Greg showed up at my door. Alone. He didn't even say hello. Just stormed in, holding the letter from the bank like it was a death notice. "You think you're smart?" He growled. "You manipulated the system." I raised an eyebrow. "No, I used the system, the same way you used me." That rattled him. He sat down and launched into a speech about how they'd been planning to refinance, how this derailed everything, how unfair it was. I listened quietly, let him vent. When he was done, I handed him a copy of the title document. "It's in my name, but I haven't filed an eviction notice. You still live there, for now." His jaw clenched. "So what do you want?" Ah, there it was. The question no one had asked since this began. I smiled. Respect, a little gratitude, and maybe, just maybe, a visit once in a while without needing something in return. He scoffed, stood up, and stormed out. A week passed. Then something unexpected happened. A small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a card. Plain white. It said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. I took you for granted. Please let's talk. Melissa?" I stared at it for a long time. Because maybe, just maybe, my message had finally landed. "She's trying to guilt you again, Bertha. Don't let her." I stared at that card for a long time. Simple handwriting, no frills, no excuses. Just, "Please let's talk." But I could feel the weight behind those 5 words. Not because they were heartfelt, but because they came only after the security of her lifestyle had been shaken. A younger me, maybe even the version of me from just a few months ago, would have jumped at it. Open arms, open heart, always ready to forgive, even if I was the one bleeding. But I'd done that my whole life. This time, I hesitated. I set the card on my kitchen counter and walked over to the small window in my apartment, the one that overlooked the empty parking lot. It was a far cry from the view of the backyard I used to have at their place. The one where Ethan would chase butterflies and Caleb would draw on the patio with chalk while I sipped my tea. My neighbor Eileen, a sharp 72-year-old with a cane that matched her sass, knocked that afternoon and caught me staring blankly. "You look like someone mailed you a ghost," she said, letting herself in like she always did. I handed her the card without saying a word. She read it, then narrowed her eyes. So, the prodigal daughter awakens. "It might be genuine," I said, though even to my own ears it sounded more like a question than a statement. Eileen snorted. "Bertha, she kicked you out of a house you paid for. And now she wants to talk? Honey, that's not an apology. It's damage control." I chuckled softly, but deep down I knew Eileen was right. Melissa had been quiet for weeks after she found out the house was legally mine. Now suddenly she wanted to reconnect? Not when I moved into the cramped apartment. Not when I was adjusting to nights without bedtime stories and mornings without Caleb's giggles. But now. Still, she was my daughter. That little girl with scraped knees and a crooked smile still lived somewhere in her. I hoped. Later that evening, I called her. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was soft. "Hi, Mom. We agreed to meet at a nearby diner the next day. Neutral territory." When I walked in, she was already there, nervously stirring her coffee, eyes darting to the door every time it swung open. When she saw me, she stood up, hesitant, as if unsure whether to hug me or just say hello. I gave her a small nod and sat down. "I'm glad you came," she said quietly. I didn't respond right away. I studied her. She looked tired, worn, maybe more than she was letting on. "I want to say I'm sorry," she began. "Truly. What we did, how we treated you, it wasn't right. We got too comfortable. Took you for granted." I stayed silent. She swallowed. "I was overwhelmed. Greg was stressed, and I didn't realize how much you were holding everything together until you were gone." There it was again. Stress. As if stress justified betrayal. "I gave everything I had left for you, Melissa," I said. Not just the money, my time, my peace. And when you didn't need me anymore, you tossed me out like I was just background noise. Tears welled in her eyes. I know. I hate myself for it. And Greg, he's angry because he feels out of control, but he knows we were wrong. Does he? She nodded, biting her lip. He's just ashamed. That was a new one. I never thought Greg even knew what shame felt like. I'm not trying to win the house back, she continued. I know it's yours. I'm not asking for anything. I want you back in our lives. The boys miss you. I miss you. It almost worked. I almost melted. Then she said something that made my spine straighten. We were thinking, maybe you could move back in. At least part-time, to help with the boys again. They've been asking for you. Oh, there it was. Not because they loved me. Not because they wanted to make amends. Because they needed help again. I didn't even flinch. I looked her straight in the eye. I love those boys with all my heart, I said. But I'm not your nanny. I'm not your financial cushion. And I'm not moving back into a house where I was made to feel like a stranger. She blinked. Her mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. You made a choice. I respected it. Now I'm making mine. She nodded slowly, tears trailing down her cheek. This time, she didn't wipe them away. I understand. I left the diner quietly, but inside a storm was beginning to calm. Later that week, a certified letter arrived. It was from their attorney, a formal acknowledgement that I owned the property, signed and sealed, a clean legal bow on what had been an emotional battlefield. That weekend, Ethan and Caleb came to visit. Melissa dropped them off with a box of cookies and a nervous smile. If you're okay with it, she said. They wanted to see Grandma. I was more than okay. We played cards, baked banana bread, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed from the belly. Later that night, Ethan said something that made me pause. Mom said, "You're the reason we still have our house." I hugged him tight. "No, baby," I whispered. "You're the reason." 2 weeks passed. The boys visited every weekend. Melissa dropped them off like clockwork, always with a polite smile and a tinge of humility in her eyes. No more hint of entitlement. No more passive-aggressive sighs. Just a woman trying to keep it together, and a mother who was watching closely. I was healing, no doubt, but I was also watching. One crisp Saturday morning, I was standing in the tiny kitchen of my apartment, kneading dough for cinnamon rolls when a knock came at the door. Not Melissa this time. It was a man in a tailored navy suit carrying a sleek leather folder and a warm smile. "Mrs. Bertha Clarkson?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. "Depends who's asking." He handed me a business card. Real estate acquisitions. His name was Alan Drake. "I represent a client who's interested in purchasing your property, the one your daughter currently lives in. They'd be willing to offer 30% above current market value. All cash. No inspection contingencies." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He smiled calmly. "Your daughter's neighborhood is being eyed for redevelopment. It's becoming one of the most desirable areas for younger buyers. We'd like to extend an offer to buy the house outright. Quick close. Minimal paperwork." I stared at him like he'd just grown antlers. "Let me get this straight. You want me to sell the house that I bought back with my own retirement funds after being kicked out of it?" Alan hesitated. "I understand this might be sensitive, but we're prepared to make this worthwhile." I didn't respond, not with words anyway. I simply motioned to the door. "Come back when hell freezes over." "Moi," I said and shut it behind him. I sat down, my hands still dusted with flour, heart pounding in a weird mix of rage and satisfaction. They wanted my house. Again. Later that day, I called Melissa. "I had a visitor today," I said. She was quiet. "Alan Drake ring a bell?" Even through the phone, I could feel the dread sink in. "Greg gave his card to someone. He said it was just to see if we had options." I laughed bitterly. Greg's always got options, doesn't he? Especially when someone else paid for them. "Mom, I didn't know." "Melissa, don't. I'm not selling. Not to Greg. Not to strangers. That house is mine." she sighed. I figured as much. Look, he's just been scared. The mortgage being gone helped us, but now that the house is in your name, he feels like he lost his golden goose, I said. Tell him I said welcome to the real world. There was silence, then something unexpected. Would you ever consider living there again? I paused. You mean move back in with you? No. I mean, you move back in. We move out. It hit me like a truck. I wasn't prepared for that. Not even a little. I know it sounds drastic, Melissa continued, her voice cracking. But you're right. That house isn't ours. We treated it like it was, but it isn't. You paid for it. We took advantage. Greg's going to fight me on this, but I don't care anymore. I want to do what's right. I didn't answer. My hand trembled slightly. I sat down on the sofa, eyes locked on the chipped coffee table across from me. All I'd wanted was acknowledgement, respect, some ownership. Not just legally, but emotionally. And now I had it. 3 days later, I drove up to the house. My house. Melissa met me on the porch with a clipboard and a smile full of nerves. All the keys, utilities transferred. I handled it, she said. We'll be out by Friday. I looked at her, this woman who had once slammed doors in my face, now carefully wiping down countertops for my arrival. I want one thing, I said firmly. She nodded. Name it. You can stay with the boys. Part-time. But under one condition. You follow my rules. That means respect. That means participation. And that means I'm not your nanny. I'm grandma. That's it. Tears welled in her eyes. Deal. That weekend, I moved back in. And let me tell you, nothing felt better than walking barefoot across those floors, opening my kitchen cabinets, setting my tea on the windowsill again, and watching Ethan and Caleb run through the backyard with sidewalk chalk in their hands. Greg never said a word to me directly. He moved out with a sulk and a grudge, and I let him keep both. You thought I didn't read the fine print, Greg? That was your first mistake. I was standing in the living room, wiping down the windowsill, when the mail came. A fat manila envelope, hand-delivered and stamped urgent. The return address made my stomach clench. Martin and Leeds, LLP, Greg's attorneys. I opened it at the kitchen table with the steady hands of a woman who'd read too many documents in her life to flinch now. Inside was a thick legal packet, pages of legalese, clauses, and a cover letter. Dear Mrs. Clarkson, our client, Gregory Walters, asserts a financial and residential interest in the property located at 1047 Cedar Hill Drive. This claim is based on verbal and implied agreements during his time of residence, including investments made in property maintenance and upgrades. I stopped reading right there. Property maintenance? The only thing Greg ever upgraded was his TV subscription. I was the one who fixed the plumbing. I was the one who paid for the new roof after that storm. I was the one who paid off the mortgage entirely. Now he wanted to retroactively own part of my house? It wasn't shocking. It was classic Greg. A man who couldn't stand the idea of losing control, even when he was never in charge to begin with. But the best part, he really thought I'd be scared. I took the envelope straight to my attorney, Thomas, a quiet man with a mind like a bear trap. After reviewing the papers, he shook his head and chuckled. He's bluffing, Thomas said. There's no deed in his name. No written contract, no shared investment documents. He doesn't have a leg to stand on, just air and arrogance. I smiled. That sounds about right. But then Thomas leaned forward, flipping through the last few pages of the original property file I'd brought with me, the one from when I took the house back. Actually, he said slowly, there is something interesting here. He pulled out a page I barely remembered signing. Fine print, back of the last page of the deed transfer agreement. You see this? He tapped. In the event of any third-party claim against the property from a former resident with no legal ownership record, the deed holder has the right to pursue civil damages for harassment contingent upon intent to disrupt peaceful ownership. Translation: if Greg kept poking the bear, I could sue him. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't on the defensive anymore. Melissa came by that evening with the boys. The moment she saw the envelope on the table, she froze. "Please tell me that's not from Greg." "It is," I said calmly. "He's trying to claim part of the house." She looked horrified. "I didn't know. He didn't tell me. I swear, Mom, I believe you," I said, cutting her off gently. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not playing nice anymore. If Greg wants war, I'll give it to him, legally, and you need to choose where you stand." She looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. "I'm with you," she whispered. "I'm done defending him." Good, because what came next would be public. Within the week, my lawyer had filed a cease and desist order. Greg was served at his new apartment, a drab place across town. But Thomas didn't stop there. He also submitted a claim for harassment and attempted fraudulent interference with property ownership. The news traveled fast. By the time Ethan and Caleb came over the following weekend, Melissa told me Greg was livid and looking for a new lawyer. I told her calmly, he can look for a conscience while he's at it. She almost smiled. But here's where things got really delicious. A month later, I received another letter from the IRS. It wasn't for me. It was addressed to Greg, care of my address. Apparently, he had listed my house as his primary residence on his taxes, even after moving out. He'd even claimed homeowner deductions on a property he didn't own. I called Thomas. He nearly choked on his coffee. "This man is digging his own grave," he muttered. Long story short, Greg was now facing federal scrutiny. Tax fraud, misrepresentation of assets. And because he'd submitted those deductions while we were still under the legal audit of the mortgage payoff, there was a paper trail. Melissa sat across from me on the patio one night, a glass of iced tea in her hand, looking about 10 years older than her age. "He's blaming me now," she said. "Says I should have fought harder for the house." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" She didn't answer right away. "I did what was right. Eventually. I hope that counts for something." I sighed and looked out at the garden. I said, "That's what matters." The final straw came 2 months later. Greg tried to file a motion in small claims court, citing emotional damage for being displaced from the house. The judge, a sharp woman in her 50s with no patience for nonsense, looked at the paperwork, looked at Greg, then said, "Sir, if you wanted emotional comfort, you should have tried a therapist, not property theft." Case dismissed. I've learned a lot since that first cold night I was told to find somewhere else to stay. I learned who I am when I stopped trying to be needed. I learned who my daughter is when she's no longer under someone else's thumb. And I learned that sometimes strength doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from consequences. As for Greg, he doesn't come around anymore. Melissa's filing for divorce. Not just because of the lawsuit, but because she finally saw the man I'd been quietly warning her about for years. And me? I'm home. The deed's in my name. The locks have been changed. The garden's thriving. And when people ask how I managed to take back everything I'd lost, I just smile and say, I read the fine print. The end. Or maybe just the beginning.